So I'm Jay Mattisson with spelkult.se, and I'm here today with the game designer Jay Banna. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here.
Well, it's our pleasure. And you brought your recently finished Kickstarter project, Savage.
That's right, a game of survival. This game has been something that I've been heavily working on the last 3-4 years. And it's funny, the originality of this game started back before I got married. And as I was thinking about what type of gift to give to my groomsmen, instead of doing a generic gift that I could just Google search and come to find out, I decided I'm going to just make a board game and give it to them as a gift. At the point of when I did it, I was a bit incentivized, one, to create a unique gift, but also to invest time into wanting to create my own board game because I've always been interested to do so. I did this all through the workings of close friends, family, and of course with professionals who were able to join me on this venture.
So how long ago is this?
That was 4 years ago. That was, I want to say June of 2019, I believe. That's when the first thought was like, you know what, I'm going to make a board game. And that's kind of what it was, but the purpose was as a gift to give to the groomsmen.
All right, well, happy anniversary.
Yeah, well, thank you. Oh my goodness, it's crazy to think it's been 4 years, and I guess time just flies because, I mean, for all of those years that I've devoted a lot of time to with putting art together, thinking of the content for both the background story and the objective for the game mechanics, and all the testing that I've done. Oh my God, it's been so long. It's been such a long time, but totally worth it.
But so this idea to give this as a gift to groomsmen, I mean, it points that you're an avid gamer yourself.
Oh my God, I've been an avid gamer for over 2 decades. I've been a big fan of tabletop games, and it's been something that myself I've always felt was it was something that I've always felt that I had to devote time to during my day because it's just a fun activity that me and my friends always partaked on.
So what are your favorite tabletop games besides your own? So
I actually like Blood Rage. I like Betrayal. I mean, I like the classic Betrayal: House on the Hill. They got a new one coming out, which I'm looking forward to. I do enjoy a lot of different style games, even some of the more, like, I used to be a big fan of Battlestar Galactica, but the time frame it takes to play that game, eventually I just didn't have the bandwidth or the time to invest in that game. But nowadays, lately, I've been playing a lot more social style games, party games, even like more entry-level type games, because there's been a lot more people that I've been spending time with who like to learn more about the tabletop game hobby. So that's been lately.
That's amazing. So we're going to get into the game mechanics a little bit, but what I'm curious about is what does Savage bring to the tabletop game that no other of these social games have? Oh, for sure.
So with Savage, a game of survival, it is identified as a semi-cooperative. It kind of falls within the social deduction realm, but with a lot more emphasis on deception than deduction. And the key element to this game is the storyline itself is that the world has collapsed due to a series of events, and you must join forces with complete strangers in the efforts of being able to survive until you are rescued by a formed civilization. And each player has 3 hearts. If any player or any number of players lose all 3 health, then the game ends immediately and we figure out who wins. But then there are 2 different roles. You could either be a survivor or a traitor. So in general, as you are playing as a survivor, you want to survive 4 rounds. That's the objective. You don't necessarily need to eliminate a player. If you survive all 4 rounds and everyone lasts along with you, then you win. Alternatively, you could eliminate a traitor, and that is a way for you to win for your objective. And the traitors must eliminate a survivor. So, but there's one twist, or the catch. The catch is that they don't care if a traitor and a survivor are eliminated at the same time because the traders still win. So they have a bit of that kamikaze rule that comes along with it, and that makes it a little bit more exciting because you don't have to be too choosy on who you eliminate in the process. But the general style is it has table talk where you are socially discussing the resources that you're managing and proactively trying to overcome unexpected events, as well as ensuring there's enough food so that each player can receive food to not starve to death. And that's another kind of mechanic in the game where, similar to Dead of Winter, when you're contributing resources to fulfill a requirement of quantity of resources, with food being a distinct resource in ensuring people are healthy or that no one has to lose a life. That's the general mechanic of how the game plays. But a super fun game. I would always recommend it to anybody who is wanting to learn more about the tabletop game. There's a lot of genres that fall within social deduction and, or I should say, different style of games of social deduction. And so what this game has, kind of leading to your question, that is unique is that it definitely focuses on the concept that it is not so important on succeeding or failing events that could hinder or help your outcome of the game. What matters most is managing your resources so that you can make it to the very end and fulfill your objective. Unless you're a trader, and that's a whole different story. But it has a great level of social discussion in addition to strategy that I feel is not as comparable to what's out there currently in the market. Yeah, you mentioned Dead of Winter, but also Werewolf seems to be a game in that vein. Yeah, if you kind of imagine Dead of Winter mixed in with Avalon, for example, like those two games, if you combine those two games together, that you would create Savage, a game of survival. Awesome. And you also mentioned that it's going to be 4 rounds, so it's kind of compressed in time. It won't take all night or all weekend. Was that a conscious decision on your side to make it a little bit shorter? It was a conscious decision to make the time frame shorter, but it also came down to the design of the game as well. Realistically, I wanted to create enough of an opportunity for survivors and traders to fulfill their objectives in a reasonable time. A game used to be actually 5 rounds. Over 2 years ago, it used to be 5 rounds, and man, the changes I went through in this is crazy, but it used to be 5 rounds, but then I've shrunk it to 4 because realistically it made more sense with the way that the gameplay took place. Yeah, so I played it a few times, and one of the things that I'm really curious about how you managed to balance it as well as you did, because it feels really well balanced. The times I played and we've been different sizes of groups. What is the maximum size of players? So the maximum for this game is 10 players, and the minimum is 4. However, I've had people ask me, hey, I have larger groups that play 12, 14 people. And I would say, well, if that is the case, then feel free to just get an additional copy. You can just mix the games together and you're set to go. The only downside of mixing them is that the events won't correspond with higher number of more than 10 players. But I could provide like feedback on, okay, then what would be the quantity of players if those numbers scale up. So yeah, the amount of players is 10, which is great options for players in general if you have larger groups. And it does play to 4 so that if you don't have a larger group, it still just plays as efficiently. The quantity of cards and figuring out the math, and that took so much time. I mean, it started out as me looking at an Excel sheet and going, okay, you know, what is the odds and probability of certain cards depending on what people hold in their hand, what they get in their starting hand, and so forth. And eventually, after like over 1,500 hours of testing, I mean, when I say this game has been tested, I mean 3 years of consistent testing. We even have a local community where every Wednesday we get new players, test players who come, and they love to try out new prototype games. So I've just been very fortunate between my math background and my ability to socialize with people to try out the game, to give me honest and realistic feedback. That's been a big advocate to me making it as efficient as it can. So could you give an example of something that a test player have told you that implemented in the game, changed? Can you give a... Oh, sure. So, she's going back in time. Please do. A long time ago, when we had tested the game, so if you've ever played the game, then you totally will relate to this. But in this game, we have this card called Disease. Okay, and so when you draw cards, and if you get a disease, the disease goes face up in front of you and you draw a replacement card. Now, back in the day, again, this is if you play the game, you'd be thinking, wow, that's kind of crazy. But back in the day, when you had a disease, you used to just, if you drew more diseases, you keep the diseases. So whereas in the current iteration of the game, when you draw any number of diseases, they would spread to the players to the right. So if you had 3, you would keep 1 for yourself and pass 2 to the next players to the right. Whereas it used to be that you would keep all the diseases. There was no spreading of diseases. And what ended up happening over a long series of testing, I had an honest feedback where, realistically speaking, when you're in a situation where you have a lot of diseases and you have to use a medicine to remove each disease, well, it kind of makes a person feel less inclined to help that person because, oh, I got to spend all these medicines now to help one person. But in most cases, it wasn't too problematic. But after further assessing the scenarios and thinking about what I wanted the game to be like experience-wise, it kind of came down to the point of, you know, it makes more sense to add more chaos to the mix so that diseases would spread. And it took me some time to really accept that reality, because when you're so inset with a way something works, you know, you just dread making a change, especially when you're balancing all the other changes that you have to consider. But after that honest feedback and constant reiteration of people giving me their same consistent response, I decided that, you know, it makes more sense. I'm going to have it so that the diseases are contagious and they spread to the players to your right. So that's like one example. There are just so many examples of things that had changed with the game over time, and that's just one of them.
Awesome. And you just finished your successful Kickstarter campaign for this game, right?
Heck yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, we ended on June 21st. So on June 21st it ended. It ended at about $12,000, and we had almost 250 backers. Super huge. My very first self-published game, and me getting that much attention and interest is huge. It actually, the number of backers and the amount of test players and players in general, like as far as test players go, I've had maybe about 70 test players. People who I've met in conventions to teach the game, I think in total it comes close to about 300 people. So yeah, 250 people, which is pretty close to the amount of people I've met at conventions, are super supportive of the game. I'm just super happy and blessed. I mean, my hope is to provide good quality products for anybody who's just as much of a board game lover as I am.
So what are the next steps here? What's happening now?
Actually, right now I am working very hard on developing expansions for the game. And so the expansions come in 2 different forms. One is adding additional event cards, which spice up the scenarios of what could or could not happen, depending on the survive and the fail condition. The other is new characters. So I don't have too much information to share on the characters, but the goal is to add more flavor for the survivors, so that they either would have abilities or personal objectives during the course of a game of Savage. And I look forward to, once the testing is all sorted out, and I have a lot of different groups to work with, I look forward to doing a potential Kickstarter in the future where people may be able to grab those.
So one thing with board games is replayability. When you play the game a few times, will it become stale and boring? What have your test players said about that when it comes to Savage? I
think that with Savage, what always causes the replayability, other than that every game is a different experience, watching it from a third person view and seeing a whole table play Savage, and the amount of excitement, even when it comes to like rolling the danger die, there is just so much thrill that's going on in each and every game. People want to relive that experience. So the replayability comes back from how people feel when they're really in tune with the game, especially with the amount of emotions that go along with it. And there's also things that happen during the game where people are just caught off guard, whether it's a person's play style or whether it is strategically, how do we make our resources count more every single round. there is a lot of room for opportunity for people to indulge in great positive experiences as it relates to stuff like that. So the replayability is huge. And I hope that even adding more replayability with those characters is going to add more excitement and thrill for the game.
Wonderful. So I'm going to ask a few finishing questions here about, so you want to be a self-publishing game publisher. Do you have any other ideas beyond the expansion packs, or is Savage going to be your focus here for the coming 5-10 years? Or
so I definitely plan on trying to do something like another different type of product. My biggest goal for when I got into this in the first place was I wanted to both experience a new board game design. So like social deduction style games like this one was kind of my first target. It was the entry to get into it was not as bad compared to like if I were to design like a deck builder, for example, or a dungeon crawler. I feel like there's a lot more intricacies to it. So this had a little bit less of that, but it still had a lot of work. There was still a lot of work involved in this style of game. But as far as the next game, yeah, I would like to take this genre, place it aside for the time being, and work on the next interesting product. So I'm looking forward to doing a different genre of game and to hopefully publish it out to the public and see what they say.
So you have sketchbooks with ideas and jotted.
Always.
Okay.
I have a book that not just has my learning experience from the Kickstarter, but also has like doodles and sketches of what I'm looking forward to do in the near future. So I hope to make those a reality. But of course, what really helps is to bring more attention for Savage so that I can use the funds to then work on the next product.
So with this experience and you doing this Kickstarter, so one question I would like to ask is what kind of advice would you like to give to another budding game designer who wants to get their idea, their storytelling in the shape of a board game onto Kickstarter? What are your top three best advice?
So number one, literally taking it from Nike, just do it, right? I think that a lot of times I've met a lot of intrinsically interested board game lovers out there who they want to make that game, or I know plenty of gamers who have actual prototype games. They will never publish it. They just wanted to have it personally just so they can teach people how to play from their own home or something like that. It's a shame because some of those games are freaking awesome. I wish they would, but my number one suggestion is to not think too much of the detail, just jump into it. I certainly didn't think of all the details when I got into it, not even on the business side, how it all funneled out. The good thing about, one thing I will say as it aligns to just do it, when it comes to the concern of risk, is that the barrier of entry is very small. You just have to, like you'd mentioned, doodle something on a piece of paper and try to make it a reality. The other thing too is that you're not devoting, other than your time, you're not devoting a whole lot to making something a reality in the board gaming side early on. But then after you build that sense of comfort, which will come soon because you're thinking a lot about the early stepping stones of making it a reality, it eventually becomes interesting to want to jump in head first and go for it. And I would, number one, with all of that said, just do it is number one recommendation. Number two, if you've already accepted the idea of making a game and you're ready to go, start with some general concept of theme, relate that to what the market shows that is realistic and people would desire, and then once you've done your homework and your research, start marketing it. You know, you may not have the game finalized, tweaked, but build a fan base, be proactive, go to conventions, socialize with people, and build that community that's based around your ideas and your product. Because if people have faith and believe you as a person to want to jump into this industry and that what you're selling is good, then they're going to back you no matter what. It's just a matter of spending the time and being willing to do it. I mean, I can't tell you how many countless weekends, nights, you name it, that I've had to devote in whether it was promoting, going to last minute events to be able to teach people how to play, and I loved every second of it. For me, I was willing to spend 90, 100 plus hours a week just with producing the game, designing the game, and even promoting the game. So just do it, market ahead of time, realistically a year before you go to Kickstarter. And then the third is you're going to want to build up that network with people at conventions. Meet with other designers. A lot of times we tend to focus on trying to get good feedback from players and see what, from their perspective, what's realistic. And I would highly recommend that you also do the same for other game designers, because they're probably going to educate you on something that you never considered, whether it's the components, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's logistics, whatever it may be. Really build that connection with other game designers as well. Regardless of how high scale they are, indie or whatnot, they all have good feedback that you can use as a resource. So those would be my 3 recommendations, feedbacks.
Wonderful. The final question though is your wife still happy that you created this gift to the groomsmen and then taken over your last 4 years and you're gone on weekends and she never gets to see you? Is she still happy about that?
I would highly recommend that you talk with any partner that you have in your life. For me, my wife has been very supportive. If anything, I've in conversations with her of ideas, sometimes like I just rattle things with her and she goes, I don't want to talk about your game, you always keep talking about the game. But realistically speaking, she knows that I'm very much in tune in it. She's been a huge supporter. She's actually my #1 biggest fan, so, and my biggest support. So without her, I wouldn't have been able to make a lot of this work. So yeah, be very conscientious with your partners and also what their needs and interests are. So that's probably my #1. What was I saying? Forget it. Let's take a step back. Let's make it a top 4. That will be #1.
Wonderful. It's been such a pleasure, Jay Banna, to talk to you about your experience with creating Savage and your plans for this deduction social game. I wish you all the best.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And thank you for the chance, the opportunity to be here.